I'm looking at the cabinet. Welcome everyone to this first meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in this civic year. A virtual meeting has now come to the end, and we're now on, I use the word face-to-face. It's not quite face-to-face, but at least within the same room. Before we start, I will read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Therefore, by entering the conference room and using the seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or other training purposes. Thank you. And then we go on to apologies for absence. Vivian.
I've received apologies from Councillors Baldwin, Plummer, Stalker and Williamson.
Thank you. And do we have any substitute members?
Yes, Chairman. I've got Councillor Caroline Pond substituting for Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Heap substituting for Councillor Plummer and Councillor McIver substituting for Councillor Williamson.
Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on this committee on the 15th of April this year. We have got a few changes in the committee membership, but those of you who were part of the committee last year, are you happy that this set of minutes are a true and accurate record? Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I can't quite agree, actually, because I've spotted a couple of typos. So on page 17, if I can get to it. Yes, the last paragraph but one, I believe Councillor D. Sunder should be Sunger. And also note that he's a he and not a she. Unless anything drastic has happened, which I don't know about.
So with that minor changes, members happy to agree the minutes of the 15th of April? A few agreements, please. Yes, thank you. Item 5, any declarations of interest? No, thank you. And then item 6, any public questions or requests to address the Overview and Scrutiny Committee? I believe there are none.
No, Chairman, there aren't any.
Thank you very much. Item 7, executive decisions. Any call-ins?
We have not received any call-ins, Chairman.
Thank you. And now we come on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the corporate priorities for 2021-22, and this is to receive an overview of those priorities from the Leader of Council, Councillor Whitbread. So if I can hand over to Councillor Whitbread. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, for inviting me to speak to you this evening. Actually, it's appropriate, I think, as we come to the end of one era and the opening of a new era of renewal post-pandemic, that we're sitting in our civic offices which have undergone a substantial refurbishment to make them fit for purpose in the modern world. And if you said we had a crystal ball and we'd prejudge some of what would happen, certainly that is the case here. Hopefully over the next 2 months, as we get, the process will be that members will be invited in to tour the building and become familiar to it. And then hopefully in 2 months it will be fully operational and ready to go. But I think you can see from full council the other evening and this evening, it is quite a different civic office that we'll be returning to, and we're making good progress in discussions with partners for the future. So it's a good news story. And I think this really underpins that transformation process that's been ongoing over the past decade as this council has changed, the management structures have changed, the way that we deliver services has changed. But the fundamental thing is we have protected frontline services. And as we look forward in the coming year, whilst we may have to make decisions on priorities because the world has changed, this council will still remain a low council tax authority whilst protecting frontline services. That's what's underpinned us for the past decade, and we will continue to take that route. Under transformation, we've seen improved technology, which stood us well during the pandemic, enabled us to have Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, and if we hadn't have done those things when we did, last year would have been an even greater struggle to actually keep things ticking over. So that's where I start from, is the beginning of tomorrow. It's a new era for this council in a refurbished building, and the remainder of the estate will move forward and produce a return for our residents in the future. And I think at this stage I'll mention Qualis and get it out of the way, because Qualis is an important part of our future, as I said at full council. Not everyone will agree with me this evening, but Qualis in itself, once it has its operational pipeline of projects for the future, and it has tranches of projects planned, starting with the 5 sites in Epping, which will deliver another new sports centre for our district. Remembering over the past decade, we have delivered a wonderful centre in Waltham Abbey with a new swimming pool, and we continue to provide good quality leisure services with our partners, Places for People, across the district. Unlike many districts, we've actually should remember the amount of centres we currently provide, and obviously we will have to be there to support those as they come through the pandemic and beyond. So I think that's an important factor to remember while we're doing this. But Qualis will be delivering on those 5 sites in Epping first of all. But most importantly, Qualis is more than just a development company. It's about the management of our council houses, its repair service that it provides for us, bringing a substantial saving to this council, which is highly important. There will be other areas that we look at in the months and years ahead that will hopefully bring greater savings, greater efficiencies and better returns to the council. And I know that as an overview and scrutiny panel, you're looking forward to receiving the presentation on the Qualis 4-year plan in the near future. But Qualis is not something to be scared of. Qualis is something to embrace, as many councils have embraced similar projects across the country, because if we want to continue to provide those important frontline services and have a low council tax, we have to maximise what we can from the assets and the opportunities that present themselves for this council. We are in a fortunate position as a council in that we have an asset base, as a former leader used to remind us, akin to some London boroughs, and that puts us in a good position to make quality decisions for the future. I keep saying renewal this evening, and we are looking at a renewal. After the past year that never happened, life will never be the same again. Things will change. The way we work will change. The things that our residents are looking to us to do will change. So that's why I use the word renewal. And I know that in the weeks ahead we will be looking again at the town centres, and there's a further report coming to Cabinet, and I know our officers have been speaking with towns and parishes as well in the formulation of those ideas. There's still a piece of work to be done, but it's not just about high streets, but it's about the way we work. And I think one of the exciting opportunities for this building is the use of the top floor, because many businesses in future won't be seeking to return to the city, but they will be looking for places to do business in the suburbs and locally. And that in itself can be good for our high streets and offer new opportunities. So that's what I mean by renewal. Also, renewal can be the important things that we need to do for our environment, whether that be more charging points for electric cars in our car parks, and the way that we manage ourselves, again, here and in the wider world. Indeed, whilst the government hasn't reflected properly upon it yet, we will need to find a way of doing hybrid meetings, and some meetings will still be online, because that means you haven't got to travel into the civic offices, and therefore that means less road usage, less fuel usage, and is better for the climate in the future. So that's what some of my ideas on renewal that will be coming through. Of course, our number one priority is still the delivery of the local plan. And I think we've realised over the past year that's more important than ever now, because we want planned development, not unplanned development. We want to make sure that the plan deals with the local infrastructure that we need. And whilst I'm sure everyone around the room has different opinions upon the local plan that's coming forward, and will disagree with some parts of it and agree with others. In fact, Councillor Phillip was true to his word when he presented the local plan originally. He said there's something for everyone to dislike in here. And I think that is true of any local plan wherever you try to implement one across the country. But the risk of not having a local plan means that developers can swoop and put forward developments where you least want them. And that's why it's so important that we get our local plan in place. I pay tribute to the officers who have worked so hard on doing that, and I would say to members, we have had better consultation on our local plan than most other councils across the county of Essex and beyond. And remember, our inspection in public went on for a lot longer than most inspections in public ever go on for. So our local plan has been through a very robust process. It's hard to sit back and think it started almost a decade ago. That's some time for a local plan. And of course, during that time, requirements have changed, numbers have changed, and we've gone through a whole raft of changes that we've had to implement. And we now have a local plan that the inspector has asked us to make some modifications on, and those main modifications we hope to be taking forward in July. The important thing about those modifications is to make sure we get that final hurdle of the consultation that's required for those modifications done properly and in harmony as much as you can with the public, and to make sure that we get our timings right. It's not so much whether we get them out by June or July, but it's a matter of getting them out with good consultation. And I think that's what must underpin this. So the local plan is still that very high priority. And one of the things that we've found through the pandemic was about homelessness and about the need for homes. And this council can be proud that it's continued to deliver a really good house building programme. And I'd like to pay tribute to Deborah Fenton, who's led some of the way on that as part of Holly's team in housing. Really pulled that back together again and got it back on track over the past year or so. And again, we're looking at the future of the council house building programme, and I do believe it's something we can be proud of and we should be pushing ahead on, because we need to have homes of all types, shapes, sizes, tenures across our district to give our young people in particular the best chance possible. Personally, when it comes to the mix, and this is something for Qualis to address as well, is that I would like to see more part-by-part rent within our district to give more people opportunity, and again, as I said previously, the importance is to have a mix of tenures, and that social housing stock is important to us as well. So again, I think this council has done well with that programme, and members should be proud of it accordingly. Moving on from there, we have other challenges, and members will see that we've gone back to our normal scheduled parking charges in June. Pandemic, and the government's now starting to remove some of its support post-pandemic, and income is important to us. We need to be able to provide the services that people want, and therefore income is important. Our high streets are important as well. But I think we should recognise over the past year that we have been flexible enough and agile enough to change our parking charges where necessary to support our high streets during that horrible period of time. But we are moving forward now, and we need the income from those car parks in order to A, maintain the car parks, but also provide all the services that people require. And then we need to be very, very mindful of what tomorrow looks like. And I think that's an important piece of work for overview and scrutiny. Again, I bring it back to the town centre piece, but I think it's beyond that. I was quite surprised when we got to full council, particularly around the town centre partnerships. and the fact that really it's Waltham Abbey, Debden Broadway are the stars of the town centre partnerships, because most of them are defunct now. And I think, again, that's something we as council can't do everything, but we do need to be working with our partners in the community, and that's business. We need to be working with businesses because they understand our high streets and what the area requires and for economic development more than anyone. That brings me on to one of the biggest opportunities we have and one of our biggest assets, which is Northfield Airfield. Of course, we've seen the successful police and air ambulance helicopters from Northfield Airfield in recent times because we promised we wanted to keep Northfield flying. That's popular with some, not so popular with others, but we really meant what we said, and we have kept Northfield flying. But we also know it's a major asset commercially to this district, and it is a powerhouse to actually help us drive the district forward. And I know we're all working very hard, and officers are working very hard on the master plan for Northfield and the opportunities for the future, and that will be coming forward in due course as well. So I think we've got a busy year ahead of us. I think you're going to be very busy as a scrutiny panel. I believe the select panels will be more important than ever. I was delighted the other evening when we had our executive briefing and reports were coming forward, and I always think a report that comes forward that says this has been before the select panel is a really good thing. And there was a number of housing reports on there that have all been to the select panel, and actually from a cabinet perspective we want to be engaged and see policies coming through in the right way and to be able to take them forward. So, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
I think I had Councillor Murray indicating first and then Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't think I have a question, but I do just have a couple of points, because obviously I think that a thorough report deserves some kind of response. I won't attempt to cover every ground that the leader covered, because it was a very impressive report. But as he spoke, a number of things hit me. And for what it's worth, Councillor Whitbread, when yourself and the Cabinet get it right, you will have my 100% support going forward in the process of renewal. Perhaps the areas where I didn't agree as much about what you were saying, I don't think anyone would deny the importance of Qualis. We are where we are as regards Qualis, and because of previous decisions of the Council, Qualis is absolutely fundamental in its importance in this Council going forward. And equally, I don't think it's a question of being afraid of Qualis. I see it more as the two S's, scrutinising very carefully and also being quite sceptical, healthily sceptical of Qualis, because I think a healthy scepticism means that you actually scrutinise more carefully. Not in any kind of order, but just as I jotted down. You mentioned the office refurbishment. In many ways, that must be good. I was going to say this later, but I might as well say it now, as you've mentioned it in your corporate priorities. I do think members need to come and see it pretty damn quick. As you know, Leader, I wasn't impressed by the fact, and I think it probably just happened organically. I'm prepared to accept that, but I wasn't very impressed that our MP was allowed to see the refurbished offices before members of this authority. We're the ones who made the decision to refurbish the offices. We are the ones who are accountable for the decision to refurbish these offices. And I wasn't very impressed that even if it happened organically following a regular meeting, I didn't think it was appropriate to allow our MP a prior visit before any other members of the authority had, particularly as it took place a week before the election, and within 3 hours of the visit, a glowing press release had been released 6 days before polling. And again, I'm not saying that was planned, but that's what happened organically. The facts speak for themselves. So let's have members visiting the offices as soon as possible. You mentioned the town centres, and that's really important. I do have a couple of concerns about town centres, I'm afraid. We've had 2 pots of extra money. We've had pots of extra money early on during the COVID process from Essex County Council, and we've also had a pot of money from the government, directly from the government. And to my way of thinking, that for whatever reason, and there may well be good reasons, but it hasn't been explained to members and it hasn't been explained to the public, Madam Chairman, doesn't appear to have been spent across the district. I can think of 3 towns, Chigwell, Buckerstill and Loughton, unless I stand to be corrected, haven't received a single penny from either of those pots, while I can think of some towns who have received money from both those pots. And I just think that needs some attention. I know we're going to get a report about the enhancement of town centres, but I would have expected local members to have had some involvement in the ideas within that report. And I flagged this up quite a few times, and I accept that it's in Zoom meetings, so perhaps it doesn't resonate as much. But I've made it clear to the portfolio holder that I certainly think Loughton councillors, and I can only speak for myself and not belonging to a group, actually wanted some prior discussion about what ideas are being considered. And they're coming to next week's meeting. And I've got no idea what the proposals are for Loughton. So I think that could have been dealt with better. I'm almost there, but your report was very wide-ranging. The local plan is the local plan, and yes, the 10 years have been very interesting, as you say. And where we would agree is that the local plan is going to be difficult for a whole host of communities. And I won't rehearse all the arguments, but I do think one of the problems was that certain communities did not perceive it as being as all communities being treated fairly. Some were treated more fairly and others were treated unfairly, and that was one of the problems with the local plan. And I think to finish off, 2 areas that I clearly agreed with you. I was really pleased to hear the importance you were attaching to scrutiny, because that actually helps the Cabinet do their job properly if you have effective scrutiny. And later on in our agenda, Madam Chairman, I was really pleased to read what was coming to ONS, what was coming to select committees, particularly all the issues around Qualis and the transfer of services. So that's really good. And my final comment is, I think you're absolutely right, Leader. More virtual meetings. Now, I understand statutory committees like this now at the moment have to be like this, and there's lots of advantages. But I think environmentally, more of virtual meetings, and I was really pleased, for example, today that we all received the invite to a briefing on Dowding Way, and that's going to be by Zoom, and that is absolutely the way forward. So thank you, Madam Chairman. Those would be my comments.
On that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think Councillor Morris made some good points initially in regards to Qualis and the need to scrutinise, and I like his idea of being sceptical, but positively sceptical. I would call it that, because I think there's more positive about Qualis than there is negative, and there's more to be positive about than there is to be sceptical about. But I take on board your points, and I hope, as you've just agreed, the fact that more of it is coming to the select panels is a good thing, and I think that's ongoing. With regards to the visit by our MP to the offices, it was one of my regular meetings with Eleanor, as you'd expect. Eleanor is our MP, which is what it says at the bottom. We'll deal with some local issues, local businesses and business issues at that time. Of course, it was also the opening of the postal votes that day, so other people were in the building as well at different times. And yes, it was an opportunity to show Eleanor around a building that I am very proud of, to be honest with you, because I think it is a real asset to offices. So I disagree with your perspective on that, and I don't think it would have made any difference to the election, whether it had been a day before, 6 weeks before, or 3 days before. It's irrelevant. It was the right thing to do, and actually I would do the same again tomorrow. So I apologise if members take umbrage to that, but I happen to think selling our district, pushing our district, making sure that everyone is aware that I'm proud, and we should all be proud of our district and what we've achieved, is nothing there. And I will also say to members that I showed the then Cabinet Member for Library Services around the ground floor of the building as well, because actually I'm interested to make sure that things move forward with this building and I get the best outcome I can for the people of our district on behalf of the district. So I don't think I've done anything wrong there. With regards to town centres and the pots of money, I'm happy for officers to come back on that, Councillor Murray. I think it's important. It was incredible actually when you look at the amount of additional funding we've had from government during the pandemic, and the amount of money that's been given out to businesses in particular in the form of grants and such. Not all the money came to high streets, but I agree with you, there was a lot of money to high streets in different pots, and some for schemes that were all ready to roll. So yeah, I take on board your point, but I really don't have all the answers before me this evening. The local plan, we agree. No one feels particularly happy, but I don't think any local plan across the whole country, let's be that bold, could ever be seen as being fair to one community or another, because there is always winners and losers with local plans. No one is ever happy when you say you're going to build houses in their community. What they're looking for is the infrastructure for the future to go with that housing, and our duty is to make sure you don't get housing coming where it doesn't need to be or is in the wrong place, and that happens when you haven't got a local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I do think we're going to have a very challenging year going forward, and I think that scrutiny will be vital. I would like to ask Chris about Qualis, following on Councillor Murray's comments. Can you tell me, Chris, what interaction we've actually had with other councils that have their own Qualises, and have we learnt anything from that? And my second question is about high streets. Obviously, we are looking at partnerships going forward, and with more people working from home, have we got any indication of what sort of partnerships are coming forward? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you. They're really useful questions, actually. Have we learnt mothers about Qualis? Yes, we have. When we went through the initial phase of setting Qualis up, we had a great deal of information and advice as to the successes of other councils and the failures of other councils, and that's something that we bear in mind all the time. There are still lessons to be learned. You know, you've only got to look at some of the successful councils at the moment and those that are going through financial difficulties. There are always lessons to be learned, and sometimes you have to, again, it really dovetails into what Councillor Murray said about having a healthy amount of scepticism and scrutiny to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You never stop learning, do you? Let's be honest, that's the lesson of life. You never stop learning. So, you know, we're always learning. We're also always looking for the best opportunities and the best way forward. That's what we need to be doing into the future. That's what this council's been good at for the past decade. We've always, you know, and you quite rightly identified, the year ahead will have challenges like no other. We've just come through this absolutely awful pandemic. Our finances aren't what they were because of it. Despite all the help from government, things have fallen behind because of it. People are less happy than they were as we went into the pandemic. You know, a lot of people have been sitting at home, and you know, it's been an awful time for people. And I said at full council, didn't I? It's brought the very best out in people and the very worst out in people in equal measures, I'm afraid, in some cases. So yeah, we're going to have a challenging year ahead of us. I think overview and scrutiny is going to be more important this year than ever before. And I'm looking forward to working with you to make sure we get the best for the council and the people. That's the most important thing, delivering for local people. Oh, right, sorry. I went into a waffle. With regards to high streets and what do I think will come from the high streets. High streets will change. I think that goes without saying. I think they're already starting to see the changes. We'll have a much better idea after we get through June the 21st if we fully unlock. Let's hope we do. I think we're all hoping and praying. This bit of extra freedom has been a good thing. It's certainly nice to be able to go into a pub again and have a pint, and even if I have to sit at a table and I can't go to the bar, you know, it's good to be able to enjoy those freedoms again. It's good to be sitting around a table like this again, even if we are over 2 metres apart, and you know, I'm shouting down the room at the chairman. But it's great to be in here again and be with real people. And how will that affect our high streets in the future with more people working at home? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm starting to see people getting to a routine now. And I start my morning probably about 8:30 on a Teams meeting. And then you'll work your way through the day. More people are taking a lunch break now. In the first part, people didn't take lunch breaks. They just worked straight through. In fact, one of the most unhealthy things, I think, from the new Teams and Zoom culture was people would work straight through. You know, wouldn't have breaks, but now people are taking breaks, and guess what? They're walking up to their high streets or driving into their high streets. They'll be going into the shops. They'll be buying sandwiches. They're doing more local. And so if people aren't going into the city and spending money there, they're actually spending money in our high streets. And long may that last. That's the way we bounce back.
Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Leader, for a great report. And I agree entirely that scrutiny is going to be very important as we support our communities going forward, and as is support to you and your team as well through what is a very challenging, unprecedented time that, of course, we are still going to learn as we come out of. Really pleased about the support for high streets and this council's continued support to the high street, and equally as pleased that we continue to recognise the importance that North Weald Airfield plays to this council. My question is, with renewal being such a broad church, and you may not be able to answer this question in one, I will not hold you to it, how can we measure the success of renewal? You know, how can we measure the success of such a broad church, and at what point will we evaluate the success of renewal?
Good question. How do you measure it? Well, to be honest with you, if you look at where we were before the pandemic, and if we can get back to something like that, that to me is success. If we can modernise some of what we do and change the way that we do things, that would be a success. Actually, the fact that we can work with new methods now, it was interesting, because I'll use this building as an example, because this building is a good example of a modern place to work. When we first started talking about agile working, and could we make one building work for all of us, we thought we'd have one building that would take up all 3 floors effectively, and probably have a bit of community use on the ground floor. And bit by bit, through agile working, through the plans that were made, and through some great teamwork from various members of staff, some that have already moved on to the next project for someone else, we've managed to create something that's really future-proofed here, and actually enables us to work in a different way, and brings to life all those things we talked about, agile working. And do you know what? We're really working on 1.5 floors now. So the top floor is there and available for businesses, and we've had lots of interest in it. And, you know, it's interesting when you look at companies like Regis, who have been very city-based, now looking to move out to different areas and into suburbs, because these areas are going to become very important. Because if people don't return into the city, and actually people found it's quite nice to live and work and play in a nice green area, I could just see them sort of things as being the real win-wins. But I think for me it is about, can we get ourselves back in that position we were pre-pandemic, where people felt good and we were moving forward. It was a very optimistic time up until that January, and you know, again, some of the things that people thought would go wrong didn't go wrong, and there are no you know, nasties out there, but we can survive this, we can come through, we can bounce back, and we can get back to where we were, and that'll be a good place to start from.
Thank you very much. Have we any other members who wish to ask any questions or make any comments? Not seeing any indication. And any other members who are not part of... Sorry. Oh, Councillor Lyons, sorry.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about change and going forward and high streets, but things that are changing, particularly about how we use vehicles, electric charging or electric vehicles, air quality, that sort of stuff that we need to look at across the whole district. Has any thought been given to how we are going to develop our roads and streets for looking forward to new technology and new services?
Ongoing. I mean, there's plenty of work being done at the moment with our Sustainable Transport Officer, all the work that we've actually done. Actually, a good point to pay tribute to the work that Councillor Lyon's done for broadband and such within the district, because we wouldn't be in quite a good place to survive the pandemic if it hadn't been done early on, and the investment we put in and was matched and increased by others really paid off for us. So from a sustainable point of view, we'll do the right things. We're looking at more electric charging points, and this is a council that is very much in touch with its agenda to be more sustainable.
Thank you very much. Anyone else with any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any indication. Oh, sorry, Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick things. What happened to Qualis Community? Is that still a thing? And are you doing everything you possibly can to make sure that the staff are okay with this agile working? Because I know it works from this point of view, but does it work from everybody's point of view?
No, very, very good point. Let's start with the staff, because our staff are so important to us, and we've all applauded them numerous times through the pandemic and what's been done and continue to be done. The fact that our systems didn't fall down and services were still provided, so I think that's a good place to start. But our staff are very important to us. They're the most valuable commodity of any local authority. They do a brilliant job for us, and yes, I know that we have regular staff meetings. I know our Chief Exec holds regular briefings with our staff, and they're fully aware of what's going on. They're fully consulted with what's going on. And it is a new tomorrow. Some won't like it though. You know, I've got to say, I speak to people all the time, doing different things, and oh no, I don't like this, working from home and all this. But we've got to find new ways, and I suppose the ways of working program transformation is ongoing. You know, just because you get through one phase of transformation doesn't mean you stop. You go on to the next one, and that's where we are at the moment. And I think it's important that staff are kept fully informed, fully engaged, and that's the way you take people with you. And one of the lessons over the past year, I suppose, for myself to a degree, and because we all have to question ourselves and the way we do things, and sometimes Councillor Murray has wrapped me around the knuckles a couple of times this year. I've only got 8 out of 10, didn't get to see me though. And it's important to listen sometimes and learn those lessons, and actually the most important thing we need to do, especially in the year ahead, is come together and move forward, because there's been a lot of fractious behaviour over the past year, as well as the good things, and it's important to actually try and work together as a council and move forward, and that includes the brilliant staff that we have as well. Sorry, I missed the other part about Qualis Community. Qualis Community is very much there, and it's an important part of what we're planning for the future, and will come into play as those 5 developments in Epping really take hold and we move forward.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating, as I look all the way around this time. Obviously, a lot of work in the year ahead, and as I'm sure you'll be aware, there will be opportunities, members, to question all members of the Cabinet at times along the way, and to ask them to come before the various select committees as well to answer any questions and to inform members of the work that is ongoing. So thank you very much again for the overview you have given us this evening, and I know there will be an awful lot more detail coming out as the year goes on. If we move on to item 9 on the agenda, which you'll find on pages 31 to 48, which is the policy on our approach to trees causing structural damage to assets. I believe Andrew Small is taking this one. I'm just going to suggest, though, that if Councillor Holly Whitbread, there is a spare seat between Councillor McIver and Councillor Rackham, which would give you the opportunity to have a fixed microphone there if you are invited or asked to take part in any of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a short introduction from me. Deborah Fenton, our Director of Housing and Property, asked me to take this item this evening because she could not be here. I have a limited knowledge, if I'm honest with you, about trees and tree policies. But one of the things that has been explained to me is that although we have an awful lot of trees in the district, what we don't have is a tree policy in terms of dealing with trees that are causing damage to either our own properties or to other people's. So this paper aims to remedy that by bringing forward a potential policy that deals with the problem that's created by not having a policy, which means we make slow decisions on some occasions, our decision making is sometimes fragmented, and sometimes lacks consistency in application as well. And what we're talking about is what to do with trees that are causing damage in terms of do they stay or are they removed? And particularly the case when those trees have high amenity value to the district. So this policy presents a remedy to that gap in terms of our policy framework. And I hand it over to the committee for discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I just first of all ask a question around the recommendation as it's set out before us? You actually referred to our properties and those belonging to other people. This seems to specify our assets. I just wondered whether it needed tweaking a bit and the policy itself does refer to other people's properties, but I just wondered whether the recommendation needed a slight tweak.
I think it is trees on our property in essence, but it relates to trees that are causing on other people's property that are causing damage to our property, and equally trees on our property which is causing damages to people and other people's as well.
So we're seeing the trees as being our assets as well as the properties in that basis. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And again, just a comment about the actual report, and it's nothing to do with what's written in it, but it refers within it to Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, and they're not actually named as such within the document itself. It's just something to pick up on for taking it forward. Right, over to members. Councillor Jennings first.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairman. Excellent report, excellent policy is all I can say. Very pleased to see it. Very forward thinking. Just a couple of points, well, more than a couple really, but it's got a few words in it that I don't like. Paragraph 4.3, may. I was worried about words may, and 5.1, based around. I would hope, I know this has been taken from Essex County Council's policy, and I would hope that this has been improved to suit the circumstances that Epping Forest presents. A couple of sort of technical questions, really. You've got the key evidence review. I know that obviously certain cases will take longer than others, but do you have any idea of roughly how long that might take? Will it be 2-3 days or 2-3 weeks or 2 or 3 months? I'll be interested to see how you tend to go about the process of evaluating the actual cost of replacement trees. If a tree has to come out, for example, and it's got a high amenity value, it's an excellent species in perfectly good health, but it happens to be doing damage. Obviously, a tree like that could attract quite a high premium, as it were. I know from my experience, when I was dealing with a government department, they basically wanted to fell a tree, but it was a very, very considerable tree of about 350 years in age. Now, that was estimated to cost $250,000. You can't replace it, but that was what it was actually came down to. The government, being not very keen on that figure, actually got it down to 60,000, but they're still talking about quite considerable sums in certain cases, although I do appreciate that that may not be the same here. In paragraph 8.1, it mentions contact trees, and I apologise if I've missed that, but I just would like to know what contact trees actually is. And the other thing was I was obviously very pleased to see that for every tree which is removed, 2 will be replanted, and preferably within the locality. I think it's an excellent idea. But it was just really to get to the foot of what size trees will be used to replace. Now, I know that trees come in different sizes. but they range from literally 30 to 45 centimetres as whips, or they can go up to extra heavy standards and beyond, which have considerable girth. And they can also come bare root, and they can also come root balled. And obviously the more mature the tree is, and the fact that it's root balled, you will get a much better take up. To give you an idea, when the Forestry Commission starts planting a forest, they will put literally hundreds of thousands of cheap trees, which are about 10p each, in the ground. But the failure rate is probably 80 to 90%. Whereas if you put a good tree in, you will get the tree actually growing at the end, and it will not fail. And the other point is, if it does fail, is there any sort of process whereby the contractor supplying these trees will be asked to replace it within, say, if it fails in the first year, will it be replaced? If it fails in the first 3 years, will it be replaced? What I wouldn't like to see is, we planted the tree, it was absolutely hopeless, it lasted about 6 months and then died, and that's it. And then our responsibility as a council is over. So, number of sort of questions for you. Happy that obviously you won't be able to answer all of those, or I doubt if you will. So if you would like to put it in writing afterwards, very happy with that, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollywood.
Thank you, Chairman. That's very loud. That's okay. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Jennings, for those questions. You're right, some of the detail I will have to come back in writing unless Andrew knows the answers this evening. But I think that point on trees dying and making sure we have the right trees is really important. I know in Chelmsford they planted many trees and a great number of them died. So actually we want to make sure if we're replacing trees and planting trees that actually they live, because that's the point of the project. Also, I was really pleased that Nigel Bedford actually picked out the idea of having 2 trees rather than 1. Obviously, that links in really well with our sustainability agenda. But on those technical points, I will have to get back to you, I'm afraid, because I don't have the answers to hand tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. A very interesting report. Completely agree with the opening 2 paragraphs and getting that balance right. My general point is much more general than the really good detail points Councillor Jennings made. And it's just something that I will want to pursue at Cabinet. So if the officer, Deborah Fenton, can give some feedback on this, that's why I'm raising it tonight, because that's the point of scrutiny. What is our role, if any, as a council in decisions about trees that are on pavements? And the reason I ask that question is that my ward is dominated with roads that are small terraced housing, very small front gardens, narrow pavements, and however long ago, probably Chigwell Urban District, so it's not something I can blame EFDC for. Chigwell Urban District planted completely inappropriate trees, so we've got disastrous pavements all over the place being caused by tree roots. So what involvement does EFDC have in deciding whether trees can go? I know that it's mainly Essex highways, but in the few cases I have been involved in over the years, our tree officer or our former tree officer did seem to get involved. So that is just something I would like to be able to have an answer for a Cabinet, please, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hollywood, you've got a response at the moment, or you want to leave it to come back at Cabinet?
Just to say that I'll make sure that Deborah Fenton looks into the details of that. Actually, I think it's a really good point. Walking around my own ward just over the road, particularly around the Beaconsfield estate, there's some real issues with trees and pavement. So actually, I'll look into that and make sure it's included in the report. Thank you.
Just following on from that, presumably the trees that are on on grass verges, which are the responsibility or ownership of Highways County Council, they presumably come under the County Council's own tree policy.
I believe that will be the case, but I don't want to commit to an answer if it's not correct. But let me look into that and come back to you if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew, you wanted to come back on the previous question, I believe.
Yes, well, I'll try to anyway. I mean, in terms of the point that you made about trees on highways, then yes, it's a highways, pavements is a highways issue, but this is an Essex policy, so I mean, I would hope there's some commonality between the way it's applied across the whole of the the Essex area, including including between different tiers of councils as well. Sorry, in relation to the questions asked by Councillor Jennings earlier, although I don't have the answers, and I will endeavour to make sure you do get those. How long before a decision's reached? I mean, I think it depends on how quickly the information can be brought together, unfortunately. Obviously, we'll endeavour to do that as quickly as we can, but if we have to wait on third parties, then that will delay the process. But I will try and find out if there's a typical time frame that we expect to turn it round in. The software that's used to assess the amenity value in monetary terms, obviously is a technical piece of software, but still there's elements of subjectivity involved in that. So it's quite a complex piece of kit, and I don't really profess to understand how it works in detail. But again, we can come back to that one. Contract trees is a question I picked up in the report as well, and also wondered what that was. I assume it's an officer within either our planning or our grounds maintenance team. It's like an email address, I wondered, in terms of any issues to do with trees, but I don't know the answer. And I did ask Deborah Fenton earlier about what size trees would we replace in the event that we put two back in. And I think the answer is the largest we can afford, but obviously the maturity increases the cost, and so whilst we won't put whips in, we'll try and put the biggest tree in that we can afford to do, but that will, I think the location and its importance to the location will determine how big a tree that we aim to put back into that spot. And I hope that helps.
Thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Wixley, then Councillor Rackham, and then Councillor Heap. So Councillor Whitehouse after Councillor Wixley. Councillor Wixley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm probably one of only two councillors who's actually a tree warden. And although I am a tree warden, I'm far from being an expert on trees. You could say that I'm an enthusiast for trees. And the other councillor is Cherry McCready, as a matter of interest. I've got comments, questions, and I've got an issue which I don't think is covered under the policy. My comments are, and some of these have been made previously, I'm pleased that it's going to be a 2-for-1 minimum replacement of any trees which have to be cut down, as referred to on page 38.82. The CAVAT system of accessing the value of the trees, I think it's quite important to recall that that system was developed by a former council officer at this council, Chris Neelan, who was an excellent tree and landscape officer. My questions are, in developing this policy, were our own tree officers involved in producing the policy? That was one. On page 40, at 9.42, at the top of the page, again, I had a question on this terminology, contact trees. I sort of concluded that maybe it was a new name for a department within the council, or failing that, it was an outside body. What I was a bit concerned about, on page 41 at 10.2, it says that the policy would be reviewed in 5 years' time, which seems quite a long way ahead to me. I would have thought it would need to be much sooner, or even perhaps on an annual basis. On page 41 again, 11.1 is reference to water service quality. I didn't understand what that was about. It didn't seem to have a relationship with trees as far as I could tell. And the other thing on the same paragraph, it refers to responsible persons. And I did wonder if that included any tree officers, because I would imagine that they would be responsible persons in this field. The issue which I'd like to raise, in the policy, there's reference to damage to foundations of buildings, but it doesn't seem to be, I couldn't find it anyway, damage to underground services, such as drains, for instance, which really brings me on to another case, personal experience, which I've had to deal with as a councillor. And this occurs to council tenants who, under their tenancy agreement, they're responsible for looking after their gardens. But I've had a case where in one of these gardens there's a huge tree which was causing a problem, and the cost of getting that dealt with runs into hundreds of pounds to employ a tree surgeon to deal with it. Now, when this first occurred, and I'm talking about the same tree, it was in 2009, the council discovered that this tree was in fact at risk of damaging an underground pipe, which the council were responsible for. So the council then took on responsibility for trimming the tree. 11 years later, the same issue has cropped up with a different tenant, but this tenant is in a very difficult position because he's not fit enough to work. He relies on benefits to get by, and he was quoted a sum of £700 to deal with the tree. Now, after a while, I was in contact with him again. I explained to him what had happened previously, back in 2009, and when I spoke to him, he said, it's all been dealt with, the council's going to deal with that tree. So I thought, well, that's a relief, because it was quite a financial difficulty for him to deal with. But a few weeks later, I received a phone call from a tree officer who, I don't know if he still works for us, and the conversation, the way it was going, was that, in fact, the council weren't going to deal with the tree, and it was working round to the fact that this tenant would have to pay for it himself, which was really out of the question, I think, financially. So I explained to the officer what had happened in 2009, and he said, I'm interested in that. Can you give me some details? I said, yes, I think I'll be able to track some details down and give you the information. He then said, I'm going on holiday for a week and I'll get in touch with you when I come back. Well, I've never heard from this gentleman again, and the tree is still growing. But my point is, I think there needs to be a bit of leeway when it comes to trees on tenants' gardens and the current conditions of their obligations to look after the garden, because having to fork out £100 or several £100s is a bit difficult in some cases. So they're the points that I would like to make.
Thank you very much for those comments and questions. I mean, perhaps this particular individual case, perhaps Councillor Whitbread will follow up with you afterwards rather than in the meeting, but if you could pick up on the other points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Wixley for them very detailed points, and certainly drop me an email on that case that you were talking about. In relation to the 5-year period, I think certainly within the first instance, it should probably be within a 1-year period, so I'm sure that's something we can include within the report that comes to Cabinet. In relation to tree officers involved, although this is based around an Essex policy, it's very much been tailored to Epping Forest, so I would hope, and I will double check, that our tree officers here at EFDC have been fully consulted on this. In relation to, sorry, you've made a lot of points, so I'm trying to make sure I cover them all, but I might have to hand over to Andrew to cover some of the detail. I do think that point around garden trees and the policy there is probably something that we should also look into in detail. I'm not sure I've covered all the points, but I don't know if I can hand over to Andrew, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually the case you present actually underlines the need to have a policy more than anything else. I think one of the issues that occurs probably historically is a lack of consistency in terms of our approach. And by having a policy, it means that we can be consistent in terms of the way we apply our decisions in future, but potentially with a degree of flexibility as well where it's necessary. I think you also asked about the damage to underground services. I would include those in the same way as damage to property. So yes, I think that was covered by this policy equally. I hope that answers the points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a good report which I'm happy to support with the amendments put forward by other members. However, there are a lot of grammatical errors in it which, it shouldn't be when reports come to this stage of the public seeing it, and I'll take that up out of the meeting. But years ago, we used to have a plain English officer who checked through reports that were going to the public. It's a very long time ago since we had someone like that. I'm just interested in what the process is to ensure that when documents are going out to the public, they are well written, because if they're not, it can lead to misunderstandings. But I'll take that up out of the meeting. Thank you.
I'm sure they have been picked up. Councillor Rackham.
Thank you, Chair. I think it will be a very well-received policy, especially for our residents. I just wanted to know, firstly, will our residents just report the trees in the same way that they have been already? And how will we look at cases? Because what happens if we're inundated with people coming to us? So one might hear and say, well, you can go to the council now. And will we have some sort of point system with that? And I wondered what will happen as well on that. What will the costs possibly be to the district on this if we do get inundated with cases? Thank you.
Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And I believe the reporting is going to be in the same way. I find it unlikely that we'll be inundated with cases, but I'm sure we'll review that if it happens at the time. I'm not sure if Andrew's looked at the costings of that, but I find that a very unlikely scenario.
Andrew?
Not looked at the costing specifically, but I don't anticipate this policy will bring forward new cases, but it will just give us a consistency in terms of how we deal with the cases that do come forward anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously we do have insurance for claims against us.
Yeah. And we are talking about houses, properties that are affected by subsidence, which is can be minor, but it can also grow. So I think it's, as you say, it won't be that many properties in the bigger picture, I wouldn't imagine, but perhaps we'll be proved wrong. Councillor Heap.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, good report, and I won't go over what everybody else has said. If you're lopping down mature trees, can you make sure that you've got somebody sensible in to cut them down to the biggest pieces possible, because they're worth a fortune as timber. And the other point I'd like to make is I know we're pretty well off compared to other authorities for tree specialists. Do we need to try and recruit more?
A question I cannot answer, unfortunately, one I will take back.
Yeah, I think that's a question that would be best answered by our arboriculturists themselves as to how their workload is at this present time. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. The paragraph 8, contact trees, that's an email address. So contact trees at Epping Forest, DC, because I've used it today.
So perhaps that should be clarified within the document.
Yeah, so that needs to be clarified. The other thing that was of interest was how do we make this customer friendly? How do we provide this as a self-service facility so that residents can actually go on and actually look at trees? And one of the questions that came up earlier to me last week was, is there a list, is there a database of trees, of preserved trees, of trees that are suspect? Because the way the flow chart looks at it is damage to council property. So is there something that would actually identify trees at risk? So before they've actually caused damage, how can that be actually looked at so a resident could actually deal with it? Because today I had a resident saying, I've got a huge tree at the bottom of my garden that's causing damage. What do I do? And I had to scurry around, and I actually got Julie Cottrell replied to me almost immediately, which was really helpful. But it's how do we give residents the information to do it? This is quite a technical report, which is really for officers, but how do we turn it into something that we can make a tick list for residents to use? And can we look at that sort of thing? The other thing that came up a couple of weeks ago was a huge 300-year-old tree where a resident contacted me and said, this tree's been cut down, it's a travesty. How did that happen? And when I dug into it, I found out that it had been authorised through the council because it had caused damage, and the insurance companies of adjacent properties had actually threatened to sue. But this was on a public right-of-way, so it wasn't even on our property, it was an Essex asset. So there's some anomalies on how these things are actually being perceived and how they're being dealt with. So it may be that the scope needs to be looked at but it's not only damage to council property, it's damage on private assets, and that's seemingly picked up in the report, but not in the flowcharts.
Thank you for that. Councillor Whitbread, do you want to come back on some of that? You can.
I think my microphone's broken, but my voice is probably loud enough anyway. In relation to contact with residents, obviously, in terms of housing, we have good relations with our tenants anyway, both through the kind of tenant forums and also kind of day-to-day relations. We bring out the magazine very regularly. We're now doing housing webinars, and I'm sure this will be something that tenants will be briefed on and made aware of. And also when people make complaints to officers, they'll be directed to the aspects of this policy. In terms of a trees at risk register, unfortunately, I don't think that's actually in my portfolio. I think it's probably Nigel Bedford, who's not here this evening. So I'll make sure Nigel Bedford gets a full response on that. And I've been really impressed by the level of enthusiasm and passion on trees this evening. So there's a lot of experts on trees in the room. So thank you for all the brilliant questions. It's been much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnett? Try it again. There you go.
Yeah. Paragraph 3.3, probably a slight technical point. Seems a bit too litigious for my liking. As a tree owner, the council or other landowners are likely to be liable. I would have thought it would be maybe liable. I think likely is almost presupposing that causation is already proven. And the other point is, I wonder whether we could suggest failing mediation, landowners could be compelled through court action, perhaps just to try and create a sense of alternative dispute resolution rather than going straight forward to court action. I thought that might be something, but other than that, a very good policy.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'm sure officers will pick up on that. I'm looking at Andrew on that one, but yes, thank you very much. I don't think we've got anybody else with any questions. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. This policy is based on damage of trees on a property. Do we have a parallel policy for the damage of our trees on people?
Georgina? Sorry? Right, no, the question will be taken away and a response given back. And again, for all the other areas that you were going to come back with, could you circulate it to all members of the committee so that we've all got that before us? Just one small comment on page 40. Do we have any mines in this area? No, I mean, it's one of those things that this is, obviously a bit of a cut and paste, which happens with these things, but I suspect that's one that could be safely removed from our... Thank you very much. But I would ask the question, have we any evidence, experience of swallow holes developing anywhere in the district? So just on the basis that mines can be taken out, but perhaps sinkholes, swallow holes just added in as a, it covers all possibilities. Okay, so I don't think I've got anybody else indicating they wish to speak. The recommendation is on page 31, and it was just that we review the approach to dealing with the trees that cause structural damage, and recommends that the policy be presented to Cabinet for approval. So members happy to go forward with that recommendation?
Yep, agreed.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to item 10 on the agenda, which is actually on the pages that were within the original agenda have been replaced with the pages on the yellow, which brings this document up to date. I don't know whether anybody wishes to say anything before we go through it, but really it is just a case of picking out anything that you have concerns about, things that you wish to bring to the attention from this document, highlight them to Cabinet members. So if we can, on that basis, go to page 1 of the work programme. Page 7. It's page 7 of the document. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. There was a couple of items on this. Sorry, perhaps should take that off. There was a couple of items on page 7. The Qualis 4-year business plan, and we've got the date of decision. I noticed that somewhere else on ONS work programme, we reference that it is coming to ONS first, but in some of these pages, it does actually reference where it's going to scrutiny. So I think just a consistent approach within this document would be useful, because in some places it does make it clear when it's going to the appropriate scrutiny, and in other times it doesn't. So when I read that, I thought, oh, why isn't that going to scrutiny? When I look at item, whatever it is, further on, item 11, it actually mentions that it is going to ONS. So I just think a bit of consistency would just be useful, so we don't have to cross-reference two documents. And then, is it appropriate just to ask how the agreements with community partners are going as regards to civic offices? Because last we heard it was going very well, and is that still the case?
Thank you for those question and comment. Councillor Chris Whitbread on the...
Shortly.
Thank you. Nobody else got anything on that page? Sorry? Oh, sorry. Councillor Whitehouse.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm not quite sure which page you're on.
Page 7.
Got to comment
It's the leader's portfolio. Okay. Have you got a copy of the yellow document? Right. Okay. So if we then move on to the page 8, the planning and sustainability portfolio holder. I know that he isn't here this evening, but if anybody has got any queries or questions, I'm sure Councillor Chris Whitbread will be able to take those up. No, I'm not seeing anything. Then on to finance, Qualis client and economic development portfolio. Councillor Murray.
Yes, a few points here, Madam Chairman. Again, I'm glad to see that we've got it going to scrutiny. In response to the leader's corporate item earlier, I did make the point, but I will still make the point again on the town centre regeneration. We've got that coming to us on the 8th of June, our special meeting next week. But I just find it really still quite odd that I couldn't tell you anything about what's in the Loughton regeneration plan. And I don't know whether that refers to the other LRA councillor. I'm not an LRA councillor, but you know what the point I'm making, any other Loughton councillor. I just find that really odd that the first time I'm going to see the regeneration plans when they're kind of quite advanced. But there we are where we are. I've made my point about the Qualis transfer, but it comes a number of times in these papers, so I'll only make it once. Really need to look carefully at transfer of other services to Qualis, because I think we all know that once they're transferred, they ain't coming back. So we will look really carefully at that. And then again, I'll pursue this point in more detail on the 8th of June. Unless I misread the report about the sale of Pearls Lane to Qualis, I didn't really like the tone of the report. It sounded to me as if Qualis had come to the council and saying, we would like to buy. And that to me seemed the wrong way round, the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog, or whichever. That's how I read it when I looked, because as soon as I was aware of it, and to be blunt, I picked it up on everything Epping Forest before I read the ONS agenda. He seems to read them immediately when we've got other things to do, but I did then read the agenda, and unless I've read it wrongly, it's written in the sense that Qualis approached us, can we buy? And that to me seemed a pretty odd way of doing things. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments. I don't know whether Councillor Phillip would like to respond.
Tom Carn, having brought the microphone, it's a pity not to have used it since I finished speaking last time before he got here. Thank you, Councillor Murray. I can assure you, as far as the town centre regeneration reports, our independent person did consult with local members, perhaps not all of the local members, and due to the way that these were produced, it was quite a long time ago, and it was during the depth of lockdown. So I apologise if you particularly weren't consulted, but certainly there were a lot of people from the Lighton Residents Association, both in terms of the Town Council and other residents associations that were involved, and as you will see when it comes forward. I think the thing to point out particularly is that these are independently commissioned reports. They're not ones that are saying this is actually what we're going to do yet. That's something that will come out of the discussion through scrutiny and then later on at Cabinet. I fully expect all the things in those reports will not be taken forward for a whole number of reasons. Some will not be appropriate, some will not be financially justifiable at this stage. We also have to take into account that those reports, as I said, were produced during lockdown, and as such the environment has changed to a degree, so things will move on. I'm looking forward to that discussion because, as I committed to you, we would bring forward two separate ones, one for the Broadway and one for the High Road, and you will be pleased to see that they will come forward as two separate reports. In terms of transferring assets to Qualis, that will be an interesting discussion to have as well. And just picking up on something that was said before, as the client side of Qualis within the council now, I will remain a very sceptical client and looking to see things that are actually justified from our side that we want Qualis to be doing. I didn't get the same view in terms of reading the report as you did, Councillor Murray, and I certainly wouldn't necessarily rely on everything I read and everything Epping Forest as being the gospel truth or even skewed in the right way. That said, we did clearly approach Qualis to be looking at that particular development that came out of the area when the planning permission lapsed for that one and that site wasn't sold. So we did approach Qualis. The report may come through in that way because it's a result of the work that Qualis has done on that site to bring forward a report as to whether they're going to do it for us or not. Qualis, as I'm sure you'll get bored of hearing me say over the next year, is a separate company, and when they are asked to look at things, they have to look at it as being beneficial for Qualis. We mustn't forget that Qualis, although it is the separate company, is there to do things that help us as a district council be more financially stable and able to do things better for our residents. So sometimes the tone of a report will depend on where it originated from, but I can assure Councillor Murray it came from us in the first instance, asking them to look at taking that on. There may be other things we've asked them to look at taking on, and they've said, doesn't fit with our business plan. And you'll see that from me as we go forward. And I do meet with Qualis Managing Director on a regular basis. And we had a chat this morning, and one of the things I was speaking to her and the chairman of the board and saying, I will be sceptical. I have to make sure that what we're doing is for the benefit of our residents, but it also has to work for them because they have to be successful for us to be successful. So it's a bit of a schizophrenic, if you'll excuse the term, way, but I need to look at it from both sides.
Thank you very much. And as has been highlighted, you highlighted yourself, the town centre regeneration and the sale of Pearls Lane are both coming to the next week's ONS meeting. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up on the town centre regeneration being parochial, I thought previously Councillor Phillip had said something was going to happen in Chigwell, but I'm not sure. Have I got it wrong?
Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I did say we are looking at rolling this out further past those 4 town centres. Clearly, at the moment, given where we are in the year, I said I'd bring them back as soon as I could. That's why we're coming back early in the scrutiny agenda to look at these town centre reports. We are still intending to go further and look at the large villages of Chigwell, Theydon Boys and North Weald as the next levels. But we need to see how much we can actually do. And what will certainly come out as we talk about this further is that this has to be very much a partnership working. It's not us doing everything. It's not us funding everything. It's not the district council doing it to places. It has to be a partnership. And as the leader highlighted earlier, when we're talking about high street regeneration, one of the key parts there is business. So we have to make sure that they're on board. And how we take that forward in the longer term, I think that's probably not part of where we are in terms of looking at these reports next week, but it's something that we have to bear in mind, that what we put in place has to be sustainable, and clearly the district council funding everything is not sustainable. And if we can get businesses involved and actually involved in working out how they should do things is the right way. And there have been business development districts in other districts around us whereby the businesses involved are actually taking an additional levy to fund things like that. That's not something I'll be proposing with these ones, but it might be an approach to the long-term sustainability.
Councillor Lyon, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's absolutely right. It is a partnership, and it's about facilitating the sort of high streets and the regeneration. We are and cannot fund it, but it's actually getting cooperation from the small businesses and facilitates some of their training and support and ensuring they have the skills to do the work that's necessary to work in the 21st century. So I welcome what Councillor Phillips said.
Thank you very much. Nothing else on that one. If we move on to page 10 of the work programme, Environmental and Technical Services, Qualis rears its head again on this one, but obviously looking at a decision going forward to September, but I don't know whether anybody has any questions. Councillor Murray?
Yes, something Councillor Heap pointed out to me. I think we probably need to delete that officer's name, don't we, on page 10?
No, previous page. Page 8.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting my pages mixed up. But there is actually on page, sorry, but it's a big page 10, but it's small page 8. We do need to delete that officer. Sorry, the name, not the officer.
Yeah, I actually did pick that one up myself and meant to have commented about it, but yes.
So we're on the small numbers, aren't we? Sorry.
We are, I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, right, then I do have something, yes, on number 10, if the small number 10.
Yeah.
And it's where I'm tying the two documents together. It's where I'm tying the two documents together. And I just want to be absolutely, because, you know, people are getting the message that, like lots of councillors, I am concerned about the transfer of services. So we've got the transfer of service to Qualis of fleet, grounds, maintenance and MOT. The date of the decision is the 13th of September. And then if you cross-reference that with the next item, it's saying on page 67 to be confirmed. So does that mean that we're going to need a special meeting to scrutinise that? Or we don't actually have a precise date of where the scrutiny is going to take place for that? Because if you look at page 67 of the main agenda, the transfer of that particular service, MOT, fleet and grounds maintenance, it says TBC, which I assume means to be confirmed. So can I just have that clarified?
Yes, thank you for that. Certainly we do have a meeting on the 30th of September, but Councillor Avey, have you got any more information on that one?
Thank you for that, Chairman. Well, I think we'll come back to you on that, whether we're going to look at this when and scrutiny. But I'll make the case again, Councillor Murray. I've said before that we will consider the business case before we take any decision on these transfers, and I mean that. And I, as a portfolio holder, will be looking really carefully at the detail of any transfer. So I hope you're clear and other members are clear on that. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that reassurance. Thank you very much. Anything else for Councillor Avey's portfolio? No. If we move on then to the housing services portfolio, there are quite a number of items on that. Some of them are policies which we will be expecting to come to overview and scrutiny at some point during the year, and some of them are taking us quite a long way forward in the civic year. But have any members got any questions specifically on any of the items? Councillor Murray?
Yes, thank you. On page 12, so the second page of this portfolio. And I probably feel strongly about this because I used to chair the Housing Select Committee. And I mean, there's a number I could have said this about, but I'm trying to prioritise because we can't absolutely scrutinise everything. But there are 3 on page 12 that I would like to think that there was some scrutiny before a cabinet decision was made. Allocations policy, and I'm reading that to mean a full review of the allocations policy. It's not just a minor amendment process. And I think the allocations policy is so crucial that would benefit from scrutiny, and I couldn't see it on a work programme unless I've missed it. I think tenancy policy is really important issue because that directly affects all our tenants. So again, I think that should be subject to scrutiny because I think you make better decisions. And I think the housing strategy, as I say, I could put forward an argument for quite a lot of them on page 11, but from experience, if I was to pick 3, it would be those 3: allocations policy, tenancy policy and housing strategy. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for those comments. The expectation is that some of those would go to the Communities Select Committee, and in fact the work programme that is shown on page 73, 74 and 75 is actually last year's work programme, so the work programme going forward is still to be set, and it will include, I'm sure, some of those items. Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and those items certainly will be going to committee. All the policy items will all be going to committee, so I think that's just a misprint in the item. And I just wanted to note as well, I think the Waltham Abbey Community and Cultural Hub, as much as I'd like to keep it, I think it actually comes under Councillor Patel now. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to ask about the 4 last items on page 12 and 13 that says that they're going to be taken through the governance structure. And I was going to ask whether that meant they were going to come to the committee, but from what the portfolio holders just said, it sounds as if they will. But perhaps the wording could be clearer, that it definitely says it's coming to select committee rather than governance structures. I just wondered how the review of the tenancy strategy at the top of page 11 ties up with the tenancy policy on page 12, because there's no mention there about the review coming to select committee at all. But I think that I hope we have established now that policies and reviews of policies are going to come automatically to select committees, which they're just beginning to do.
Yes.
If I could just go back, Chairman, to page 4 and 5, we have there the corporate aims and key objectives, and the items are all listed under stronger community, stronger place and stronger council, which are the names of the select committees, but they don't tie up with the terms of reference of those committees. For example, under stronger councils, we've got customer satisfaction, that comes to communities select committee. It does look as if there needs to be a bit of reorganisation, really. I think these corporate aims, should tie up with the select committees. That's what the select committee should be doing, look at these corporate aims. So I'm not sure what the way is to take that forward. Maybe Constitution Working Group, I don't know, but it seems to me the select committee should be looking at these corporate aims and key objectives. I don't know where the present terms of reference came from. Thank you, Chairman.
Certainly when these select committees were put in place, it came through the Constitution Working Group. So if there is a feeling that it needs to be looked at, then I'm looking at the chairman of the Constitution Working Group and the expectation that it would perhaps come to that group. Councillor Rackham.
I think, going forward then, we will use our committee to look at certain things that we need to, and I will speak to the officer and we can have a chat about that going forward. Okay?
Okay, thank you. And certainly there is established the principle that the policies should all come to a select committee, if possible, if in the first place, for instance, but if not, to the main overview and scrutiny committee at some point. Okay, thank you very much. If we move on to, oh, sorry, Councillor.
If I might, the select panels actually have the authority to change their terms of reference as long as they come back to your committee as an overall. It doesn't need for that to go through constitution.
And obviously at the first meeting of each of the select committees there will be the opportunity to look at the work programmes, and the terms of reference are always an item on the agenda as well, so that the expectation is that they can be looked at that time as well. Okay, thank you for that. We have nothing on customer and partnerships. There's one item on page 15, community and regulatory services, the North Weald Airfield Master Plan, which we had reference to earlier. Has anybody got any questions around that? Obviously, it's an ongoing item, but with a decision date of the 12th of July, which is bringing it closer. No. And I think that is the last of the items where there is any work indicated on this document. So I think we've concluded the review at this time of the Executive's programme. Thank you very much. We now go on to item 11, which is back on the main agenda, pages 65 to 72. Mr Woodhall, you're going to just run us through on the work programme for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the current state of play for the work programme for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this coming municipal year. The number of standing items have been reduced from 5 last year to 3, with 2 items being allocated to select committees. A number of members have clearly read this evening and have already referred to it, so the dates are there with the items. Some of them are to be confirmed. There is currently no external scrutiny listed on this work programme. If members would like to consider that and make Democratic Services aware if there's any options, it can be discussed at the OS Agenda Planning Group, and items can be added to the work programme later in the year. Just to point out, this work programme isn't set in stone. It's a working document and can be revised, and will, I'm sure, be revised as we work through the year.
Thank you very much for that. If you look at the work programme, obviously we have the extra meeting next week bringing in those items that were added to the programme. The July meeting is already quite a heavy agenda that we'll have before us on that evening, but going forward later in the year, there is the opportunity to bring in external organisations, groups that we may feel we want to look at, ask questions of, and just scrutinise some of the work that they do. I'm not necessarily looking for anything to be thrown out this evening, but if members would like to give this serious consideration and let, I think probably Mr Woodhall know of any organisations, let's say, or groups that you might like to bring forward. Councillor Whitehouse.
Chairman, I don't know how other members feel, but I would welcome not having so many external presentations to overview and scrutiny committees, because they do take up a lot of time, and we're often rushed when we should be scrutinising the items that are coming of our own services. And I think that we should have external presentations when they relate to issues that residents and others are raising that are really of immediate concern. There should be some other way in which organisations want to come to present to us and give us updates, present to members of council. We used to have special meetings for that. We used to have presentations before council meetings. But I just think they're taking up too much time of the scrutiny meetings, that we can't do proper scrutiny, particularly on when we have Qualis coming. We need the whole of the meeting to discuss that. So
Well,
I
I think,
just
yeah.
asked that it could be considered. I don't know what other members feel about it.
Well, I think that's why I specifically highlighted the July meeting as one that was already a very full agenda, and that we'd not be looking to bring in any external groups on that particular date. And as you look through the rest of the work programme, as it stands at the moment, the other dates going forward do not have such a heavy workload. But I do take on board your comments around the fact of being related to concerns with residents in the area, organisations that perhaps immediately affect our residents in all sorts of ways along the way. Councillor Murray.
You've kind of taken my point, Chairman, which is fine. That means I agree with you. I feel that we need to respond if there's something of real concern, and by definition there's going to be a time delay. I understand that, but I think that's where we do external stuff if there's something where there's real concern or has been real concern. And as part of our response, I realise portfolio holders and so on are probably responding immediately to something where there's a high degree of concern, and the leader. But as part of the response, we can say, or decide at our next meeting, well, we will scrutinise what has happened here and why it has happened, and try and avoid it. Unless I'm misreading the situation in Epping Forest, could I suggest on page 68 that I wouldn't like to get rid of the first one as a possible reserve programme, on the reserve programme, because I do think Essex County Council and Children's Services is something that could emerge, and it's an ongoing thing. I mean, I don't have particular concerns at the moment, but I really do think the Epping Forest Sixth Form Consortium is probably kind of past its need for even to be on our reserve programme, unless I'm completely misjudging it, and I am a bit close to it, I understand that. But the sixth forms that are concerned are now in their 6th year. This was something that we wanted to do initially when they were first set up. As I say, they're now in their 6th year, and to be honest, this is a legal entity, which I know was necessary, and former County Councillor Valerie Metcalfe and our MP and Councillor Pond as a county councillor, Chris Pond, were very involved, and this was a legal entity to ensure that the sixth form, the schools concerned, actually got their sixth form, but they've never really ever operated as a consortium. There was a level of lip service to that in the first couple of years, but I can assure you that in any real sense of the word, it doesn't operate as an Epping Forest Sixth Form Consortium. Debden Park High School, Epping St John's, Roding Valley High School, because they were the ones in the consortium, operate independently. So I just think that that's, there is no concern about how it's operating, and it's a legal entity rather than something that is there in reality. So I think, personally, I feel that we shouldn't really have that on our paperwork anymore. But other people might feel differently. But I pick up nothing but excellent comments from parents whose children are in any of those 3 sixth forms, and I think that boat has sailed.
Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Murray. It is something that we have discussed at various planning agenda meetings, and it's kind of got left there because I believe you may well have been the person who brought it to our attention in the first instance, and we didn't know enough about it to be able to be comfortable taking it off. But if members are comfortable that we do now remove that from the work programme, I'm seeing.
Yep, agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. We now go on to the overview and scrutiny. Sorry, this is the external list. These are more the ones that we have done in the past, and it just gives an indication of those organisations that we have spoken to, who've come and done presentations, and bearing in mind, the sorts of organisations that we have covering our district. Again, if members do have anything that they feel they would like to be brought forward as a possible external grouping, then do still put in any suggestions to Mr Woodhall. Sorry? Councillor Lee? Sorry, could you just get my phone?
Sorry. I wonder if it's possible to do scrutiny on some of our housing associations, because going round before the election there was quite a lot of complaints where work isn't being done, and we do put our people on our waiting list to the housing associations, and there was a number of complaints in a particular area, which I did mention to Holly. Until I've got time to go around and actually make sure I've got all the right information on everyone, but I wondered, can we do some sort of scrutiny on them?
I will pass over to Councillor Holly Whitbread, but I just wonder whether this is perhaps something for Community Select Committee rather than the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a whole.
It may well be for the Community Select Committee, but I think that would be an excellent idea. I know I'm still chair of the Community Safety Partnership, and one piece of work we're doing there is around ASB and housing associations. But I think there's a wider question to ask around housing association and their performance locally. So I think that would be a great piece to do through scrutiny.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, you wanted to come in on that one?
Yes, I would endorse that view. Roding Ward has quite a large development called Hanbury Park, and a third of that is housing association, and I do pick up similar things. And I think your point about Community Select Committee is excellent, particularly as Councillor Lee is likely to be chairing that, looking at the paperwork.
Right. So that one will, you can bring it to the Select Committee when looking at their work programme. No other comments on the general. Then if we look at page 73, which is the first of the 3 Select Committee work programmes, in a sense, this is perhaps irrelevant at this time. Obviously, what you've got before you on Community Select Committee is last year's work programme, as is the case for Stronger Council. In fact, all 3 of them are last year's work programmes. Now I look at, no, sorry, Stronger Council is next year's work programme, this current year.
Well,
but
half of the year.
Yes, but the others are the previous years. And I think the reality is that these are work programmes that will be looked at the first meeting of each of these select committees, and a way forward and what is taken forward at that time will be decided. So if members are happy to leave it at that. Yep. Thank you. We now come on to item 12 on the agenda, which is the membership of Overview and Scrutiny Select Committees for 21-22. And you'll find that again on the yellow document, the report on page 21, and going on to page 22. Mr. Woodhall, are you going to run through that procedure?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is what the Overview and Scrutiny Committee does each year at its first meeting, as the 3 select committees report to the committee. And in the Constitution, it is down to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to determine the membership and chairmanship and vice-chairmanships, and not annual council. Currently within the Constitution, each select committee should consist of 11 members. There are 11 nominations for membership for each of the select committees, and at the moment we currently have 1 nomination for each chairman and each vice-chairman. If there are any further nominations, then they need to be indicated tonight.
So can I first of all ask, are there any other nominations for those positions? I'm not seeing any indication. And so can I also then ask that this committee makes appointment to membership of the following select committees as set out under recommendation 1, and with the positions of chairman and vice chairman as set out recommendation 2, but all of those names set out on pages 25 and 26 of the agenda. Councillor Murray.
Yeah, not a controversial point, Chairman, but I was absolutely delighted to see that 2 of the vice-chairmen are new members. I think that's good. So new members elected in May, and they're already vice-chairmen of select committees. Throw them in the deep end, leader of council. That was lovely to see.
Thank you very much for that comment. So members are happy to agree those recommendations? Great, thank you very much. I do realise now, as I looked at it, that I actually mixed up agenda items 12 and 13. I think that was switching between the 2 different reports. But I think we've now come to the end of the agenda. As I understand it, we have no items for the exclusion of public and press. So I will close the meeting at 8:45. Thank you all very much for your attendance.